Just check it's on. Oh, it's on. Yeah. So welcome everybody to Numeracy in the early years. So this is a workshop this afternoon for you to take away some ideas that you can do with your children at home. Part of attending this workshop is that you get a kit, and we will go through the kit with you throughout the session. And there are things that you can use with your own child at home with the kit. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we as a community of parent learners are gathering on the lands of Kaurna people. We acknowledge their relationship with the land and that they were the first custodians. I would also like to acknowledge Mary and Lisa, who applied for a grant late last year, was it? In order for us to run a workshop like this, and in order for us to provide a kit with some resources and some things inside for you to use. I'd also like to acknowledge Annette and Kylie, who spent lots of time earlier in the week putting together these kits for us. So thank you to everybody who has helped out with that. Just before we really get into the maths, I would like you just to turn around to the people around you, just introduce yourself, and maybe let the people know around you who your child is and what year level. That might just be helpful to you.
Get you some blocks as well. In case you want to do some drawing, or we've got some blocks over there as well.
Okay, thank you. Nice to see so many faces here this afternoon, so thank you for joining us. The learning intention for the session today is to take away an understanding of basic number strategies that children rely on to be efficient mathematicians. Also to engage in some hands-on maths activities that can be used at home to develop automaticity of basic number facts. So everything we're talking about today, we want to have a quick recall of those number facts, to be able to whiz through them pretty quickly and to build on that throughout the year levels. The success criteria is to understand counting strategies and be aware of how you can support your child with these strategies. Just being aware of them is really helpful too for you. To lead the session with a variety of fun and practical games that can be played at home to develop automaticity. So just running through some of the counting principles. So there's one-to-one correspondence, so that's when children are counting every single object, 1, 2, 3. And that one-to-one correspondence in the very early years is really important, because often what we see is children will just count, but they're not matching one-to-one. So they might go, there might be 3 blocks out, they might go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, rather than actually saying 1, 2, 3. The cardinality rule, which is the last number is how many are there. It's the total number within the set. Order irrelevance rule. It doesn't matter which way you count, you get the same answer. The stable order rule, number sequence or how we count always stays the same. So it's always 1, 2, 3, that ordering. And then one of the other principles is you can just tell how many there are. So sometimes when children are familiar with playing lots of board games, they can quickly sabotage the number that comes up on the die. So they'll know automatically that that's a 6. Okay, and they'll be very familiar with those kind of arrangements. So they're familiar with the arrangements that are standard on a dice. So 6 is always represented like that. But it's good sometimes to flip it around, and when you're working with your child, you know, 6 could be like this. And then asking the question, how do you know it's 6? So they might say, because I counted them. So they might show you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is that 1-to-1 correspondence. Or they might say, I know that 4 and 2 is 6. Okay, or they might say, I can see 3 and 3 and I know that 3 doubled is 6. Okay, so there's lots of ways they do it. Asking those questions, how do you know, is always really good and kind of stretches their brain a little bit as well. Okay, so some counting strategies. There's the counting all, or the direct modelling, representing each step in the problem. Counting on from a smaller number to a larger number. So the counting on is if you've got dice with numbers on it, or just true dot dice. Starting with one of the numbers and then counting on from there. So if you've rolled a 6 and then another 6, if your child doesn't know their doubles yet, they might stamp that 6 in their head and then count on 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's the counting on. They can start from the smaller number, the larger number, doesn't matter. They'll probably start with the number that they can sabotage first and most easily. There's interval counting, so counting by 2s, 5s, 10s, 20s, however they do it. Known facts, and that developing a sense of 10 is critical, so knowing all their facts to 10. 5 doubled is 10, 2 and 8, 1 and 9. Using doubles. Doubles is something that we rely heavily on as well. So knowing your doubles and, you know, starting with probably doubles to 10, or, you know, you could start doubles to 5 to begin with, and then doubles to 10 and start building on it and just knowing those doubles automatically. Using a derived fact and building on it, so knowing that 8 plus 2 is 10. Using place value. And place value, it's more than just understanding that this is the tens column and this is the ones column. What does that actually mean? It means that there's a group of 10. That 1 is represented by a group of 10, one group of 10, and there are 0 ones. Okay, we're going to play a place value game afterwards, so we'll talk some more about that. Counting back, and then the doubles plus 1 or take 1. So I know that 5 and 6, I know that 5 and 5 is 10. If I add 1 more, it's going to be 11. So using your doubles first and then building on that. Seeing patterns in number. Children need to have lots of experience of playing with numbers and representing numbers in different ways. This could be done with dots, dice, dominoes, grid paper, and we talked, that's exploring number in different ways, but it could also be that, you know, there's some grid paper and they're colouring in 6 to represent it on there. So arranging it in different ways. One of the cards you have inside of your pack is a 10 frame. We might actually start with the 10 frame activity because it kind of fits in here, which the children can explore different ways of making 10 or different ways of making 12 if you wanted to use egg carton, or you've actually got 2. So if you open up your pack now, do you want to just flip to that slide, Mary, and it's this card here. Sorry, thank you. That's your 10 frame, or 2 together is 20. last one, do you think? Or was it one from the sheet? Okay. So in your pack as well, if you've opened it up, is a list of games. So at the bottom of the card games, there's one that says 10 frame game. It's actually a dice game, but it's at the bottom there. If I just talk you through that one, and while we're talking about patterns in number, it's probably good that we do this one now. So it says, roll the dice and put the corresponding amount of counters in the 10 frame. So once you've done that, so this is, you roll your dice and you choose that many counters and then you arrange them in the 10 frame. You're only allowed to have one counter per box, so you can't put more than one counter in. And then you can ask questions like, how many more do you need to equal 10 or to make 10? Now, this can change by the number of frames you have. So you can have 20, you could have 30, you could have 12 with an egg carton, you could have 24, 36 and so on. So have a fiddle with that now, just to get the hang of it. And it's at the bottom of your card games sheet. Thank you. So that one's a pretty simple one. So if you have any questions around that, just feel free to ask us.
Just play if you want, but I'm ready to
How many more?
It's very open. You could do there are lots of possibilities with this one.
Roll it again. One more time.
So you know, if you're making the number 4, you could say make the number 4. Can you make the number 4 in a different way? So you're always exploring different possibilities. It's not always a 2 by 2. It could be a 1 by 4. So different arrangements, a 3 by 1. So understanding what number 4 is made up of and all the different combinations of that as well.
How many black ones do you have
Sorry, they get
Okay, so do you get the hang of that one? We'll whiz through pretty quickly because we've got a lot to get through, but also they're games that you can just adapt and change to suit your situation. I guess it does look very simple, but we just talked at this table here. If you're doing 4, thank you, and your child does a 2 by 2 kind of array, you could say, could you do it another way? So they're knowing that 2 plus 2 equals 4, but they're also knowing that 3 plus 1 equals 4, and 4 plus 0, because you've got nothing in that column, equals 4. So all the different ways you could possibly make number 4, for example. Okay? So seeing patterns in number also saves time. So knowing that automatically and knowing our patterns makes us really efficient at maths. Okay, the first game we're going to play is a place value game, and we will do it with hundreds, tens and ones today. So you need to have a recording sheet that looks like this. You're actually going to be recording on your partner's sheet, not your own. Okay? If there's not enough sheets around, if you could just share and use a different colour, or just the left side is your number and the right side is my partner's number, however. So you need to roll the dice and then you record the number that you get on your partner's grid. Now the game's called Meaning, and it's called Meaning because you want to make the lowest number possible for your partner. So if you roll a 6, Are you going to put it in the hundreds column or are you going to put it in the ones column? The ones column. Okay? All right. So if I roll a 6, I'm going to put it in Kate's ones column. And then she'll have a turn and she rolls a number, or she'll roll a number and then she'll put it in mine. And then the winner is the person that ends up with the highest number at the end. So lots of these games are pretty competitive because that's what motivates children. And you know, there's a winner, the highest number, lowest number. You can change it. It's the person with the lowest number that wins. You can just adapt them. So have a quick go at playing that with a partner and see how you go.
Shall we play the finals? You can use the 6 and I'll use the 8. The 10 side dice. I'm cheating. No, I'll cheat. Have you got so I think you will my sheet.
We can try and trying to give me the whole.
So you get to write the 3.
So that number there would be 533.
300. Sorry, I got it If you're playing with your partner, you decide what you want. If you want them to lose, and you want to lose, and then you sorry. Oh, you're alright. Only got one more. And this is your partner. You want to put your 3 in the partner. You want You've already got one there, so you can that one now. Okay. Sorry, I know that you yeah, all right. All right. So you've made one from your side. Yeah. And you took one more roll. 4.
No, not yet. You're the first row, aren't you? My roll.
Okay. Can we just come back together for a minute so I can just explain? So this is a place value game. So we're talking about the value of each number in each column. So can someone tell me the number that they made? Just any number.
252.
Okay, 253. So we know we've got ones, tens and hundreds. So if your child has made that, they might be able to read 253, but we need to be clarifying that they know what that actually means, so the understanding behind it. So how many hundreds have you got in there? So you can actually, like when you're working with a child with place value, you can actually expand it so that they see there's actually 200 and then there's 50, and you could add a plus sign if you wanted to, and then there's 3, and that's how we make it up. We use this equipment in the classroom. So this is called MAB equipment. So these are your hundreds, and then these are your tens. So we've got 253. We don't really start using this MAB equipment. Oh, we're not going to be able to turn that off, are we? We're just going to have to put up with that, okay? It's chance and dance time. So, I've forgotten what I was saying after that.
200, you expand that.
We've expanded that. We don't really start using this equipment until year 1 and beyond. In reception, often what we do is we use pop sticks, and children are actually physically bundling to understand the concept of 10. So they actually know that that's a group of 10. And then, so we make groups of 10s, and then they make one group of 100. So often we just wrap them around with pipe cleaners or rubber bands to demonstrate that. So you're not going to see this equipment in reception because developmentally they're not ready for that. They have to understand that group of 10 and that concept. Okay? Some children are developmentally ready, but we don't want to rush children through too quickly knowing these numbers but not actually understanding why it's 253. Okay, and then the trading all comes into that as well.
Larissa and Ivana Burko to be collected from the front office. Larissa and Ivana Burko, thank you.
I've lost my PowerPoint now. I've left that somewhere. All right, let's just pick, yes, that's it. Good job, thank you. All right. So here's another game. It's called Beat My Score.
Message for Ashton Priest to be collected at the pickup zone after
Sorry.
school, thank you.
We didn't think of this. Each person has a dot die. They roll the die and record who has the larger number. After 10 rolls, you tally to see who the winner is. So each person has a dot die, they roll the dice and record who has the larger number. And then to add a further challenge, players could use 2 dice and add them together. All the games we're doing today can start from the basic, but you can make it more challenging by changing the equipment, by changing the amount of the equipment. So, you know, the 10 frames could be 20 frames, 24, 12, whatever, using 2 dot dice, using a dot dice and then one with numbers on it, using 2 with numbers. So changing the level of the game. Do you want to have a quick go at this one? Just with your partner, just a few minutes, like it won't take long. lots of repetition of the same kind of thing. It's a lot of practice. Alright, so that one's a pretty easy one to run through, but changing the dice, rolling 2 dice each, adding them together first before you record your number, changes the intensity, I guess, and the challenge of the game. Alright, we're going to whiz through some of these games because you have got a copy of all of them on the PowerPoint. So we want to go through to, let's do double that first, and we'll do the number chart one as well. Alright, so this one is with your deck of cards. You don't all need to unpack your cards. I think if you've just got one, it will be fine. Using a deck of cards with picture cards removed, the first person turns over the first card and doubles the number. The second person turns over the card and doubles the number. The person with the largest double keeps the cards. So keep going through your pack of cards until you get to the end. Just spend a few minutes just having a go at that one. They keep going there.
Picture cards. Double. 18. 18.
Yeah.
9.
But they do need to know the modality eventually.
18.
Yeah. With that double one, that is about practicing doubling numbers. Okay, so you're wanting children to know those facts automatically. The challenge is there, you could, eventually we can triple our numbers. There's a lot within that. You need to actually describe what triple means. Double is hard initially as well. And in the classroom, I often refer to an ice cream because children get it if they know they're getting a double scoop or 2 scoops. Triple is 3 scoops. So we're doing it 3 times or 2 times. And it's repeated addition. So if you show them that it doubled, it's 2 plus 2. And then tripling is... And all of this is patterning, and then it leads to times tables eventually. Okay? Alright. The next game, it's not really a game, it's using your hundreds chart that's in there. So that's a laminated, I think. Yeah, there we go. Can I borrow that? Thank you. So this is just understanding, I guess, the power of 10. You're asked to put a counter on any number in the top line from 1 to 9 and then count on 10. And then continue and then record the number. So record the number you start with. I start with 5 first. Move on 10 spaces. What number do I land on? And then the children would record that and then keep recording as they count on 10. And then you would be asking them to identify, can you see a pattern within that? This number chart can also be used for any kind of addition, subtraction. Last night when we ran this session, we probably didn't think of this, but one of the parents asked, I use this word, but my child doesn't understand it. So they were saying they use the word addition, subtraction, multiplication, rather than in the classroom we're always using add, take away, times. They do need to know both.
So making them aware that it's the same, it means the same, and introducing them to both is really important. How about we just give you some time to explore some of those other games on that sheet that's already in your pack. So there's lots of other activities there. Plus you've got the PowerPoint, so there is this place value war is not on your sheet, but it's on the PowerPoint, and so is that greedy pig. So just play another game with the people at your table just to explore another one.
Oh, it's in the PowerPoint, is it?
Where's the power?
Oh, it's really cute. I like it.
Oh, that's just a raw
Like
game.
it.
So you just
Dice cards.
you just play that. And beside I was starting that,
It's like Yahtzee.
Yes, you got to decide when you're going to opt out of that.
Are you going to show her your... We just keep going, or you can pull out. If you get greedy and it's a 6, you get...
Okay, we might just come together again and just continue on a little bit because there's a few more things I'd like to share with you. In your pack, there is a list of activities. Oh, let's talk about conversations in the car first, and then we'll get to that. So there is so much you can do incidentally. Doesn't have to be a conversation in the car, but that really is just the incidental conversations that you have. So, you know, you're just going somewhere and you could just be doing some interval counting in the car. You can do it just together, but you can also make it into a bit of a game where, if we're doing 2s, 2, 4, 6, 10, so that kind of thing, just to get into the rhythm of lots of interval counting. Starting at different numbers is really important, not always starting at the beginning in anything you do. So that's really important. Reinforcing the understanding of 10, that sense of 10, we mentioned that earlier, that's so important. But that can be like, you could just be 5 and what makes 10? I really need your help. 5 and what makes 10? You know, that kind of talk. Which one doesn't belong is probably a little bit more visual than just something you can have a conversation about, but it would really make children think. So that one, 5, 10, 15, 2, you're wanting children to identify which number really doesn't belong in that sequence of numbers. And clearly that one's the 2. You can make that easier for younger children. So you might have 1, 11, 13 and 89. And you might say, okay, which one doesn't belong? It's the 89 because none of them have a 1 in them. So, you know, just looking at things differently. With the triangle, square, octagon, circle, you probably need to have that visually in front of them, but it would be good for them to know, work out which one doesn't belong. And, you know, the circle doesn't have any vertices, so that would be the one there. But so that's really important. So lots can be done, playing board games, all of that helps with that automaticity of number. There's a handout in your packet from Tierney Kennedy, and that has some excellent ideas. But like I said earlier, it's about clarifying with the children and trying to dig deeper into what they mean by things. So for example, if you're making a sandwich, where would I cut this if I was going to cut it in half? And they can tell you. And then you can say, so would it be okay for me to cut my sandwich like that in half? So asking them why that would be okay or wouldn't be okay. And then, you know, the whole idea of, you know, two halves being equal would come up. You could do, you know, can you cut your sandwich into 4 equal parts? Okay? That was really those kind of activities at home, just in the everyday things that we do when you're cooking with your children, in anything that you're doing, there's lots. You know, what am I spying? So there's lots of practical ideas in that. Last night we also talked about odd and even numbers, so we might just touch on that as well. So for children to understand that.
Message for Elijah Ben, away from the office after school. Elijah Ben, thank you.
Children understanding the difference between an odd number and an even number. So you can do that by rolling the dice. You can do that with 1, you could do it with 2, however many you need, depending on what kind of numbers you want. And then saying, okay, I'm going to get that number of counters out in front of me. So I've rolled 10. I need to find out whether that's odd or even. So it's about sharing it out between you and your partner. So actually physically going 1 for you, 1 for me, 1 for you, 1 for me. And then, oh, I've got 5. How many have you got? You've got 5. Is that fair? If it's fair, it's an even number. If it's not fair between us, it's an odd number. Okay? So, and then, you know, you could do things on your number chart where you actually identify all the odd numbers on there and the even numbers so that they can see the pattern as well within that. I think that's what we talked about with odd and even numbers. Sometimes it's really good to do that with a few lollies because then they really get the concept of, is it fair that you've got 4 and I've got 5? So with food it works well. Yeah. Now, we do have, there's the mathematical language slide too. Yeah. So in the classroom at school, we do focus a little bit, thank you, on mathematical language. And that's something that really develops as children get older. So mathematical vocab is a language specific to maths. Children need to be exposed to this and to understand it in context. So teaching addition or adding or subtraction and taking away all needs to be taught in context.
And we have everyone down the hall in 5 minutes, please. 5 minutes, everyone back down in the hall.
And we better be finished by then because they'll start shouting their chants out. It is more than just memorising definitions. It's about using the vocab and applying it to their learning. And our job as adults is to clarify that meaning with them. What do you mean by half? What do you mean by quarter? And giving that information. We support children by encouraging the use of a mathematical dictionary. So the link that's on the PowerPoint is quite a bright, Mary just had it up, it's a bright, colourful one. So, you know, start exposing your children, you know, having a look at some of these things and showing them visually what these shapes are or what an odd number is, what an even number is, whatever you're working on at home with your child. That link is in the PowerPoint. Yeah, the second to last or third to last slide. And just, I guess, before we conclude, I have got a feedback form. That one there. Oh, geez, that's tiny. If you want to write down that link, it's very tiny on that PowerPoint.
So 1 for
dictionary.
Okay, so it's, what's the start of it? A-N? Oh,
A maths dictionary.
A Maths Dictionary for Kids.com. There are lots of different versions, but this was one that I selected. It's just helpful. There is a feedback form on your table. We would appreciate if you just spent some time to give us feedback and to let us know if you found this session useful or not useful and what you can do. And just before we finish up, I'd just like to say that maths at school is more than getting the right answer. It's about how children solve problems. Can they do it in different ways? Maths has changed so much and they really need to have a deep understanding of what strategies they've used, being able to communicate those strategies they've used, as well as being fluent with those strategies. Okay? Are there any questions? If you do have any questions, just refer them back to your classroom teacher. No, I'm more than happy to answer questions. All right, thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you found it useful.